So, I want you to picture the vibe. On December 31st, 1899,
Oh, New Year's Eve.
right, New Year's Eve, the turn of the century. If you were at a party in, say, London or Paris or Vienna, the mood wasn't just happy, it was borderline arrogant, honestly.
Yeah, arrogant is the perfect word for it.
There was this overwhelming sense that humanity had finally just, cracked the code.
It really was the absolute peak of the Enlightenment project. You had this deeply held belief that was almost like a secular religion at that point.
The inevitability of progress.
Exactly, the inevitability of progress. The core idea was that history only moves in one direction, and that direction is up. I mean, we had science, we had booming industry, we had reason.
The 19th century had just been this massive winning streak for them.
Right, curing diseases, building railways across continents.
It's basically the Titanic mentality before they hit the iceberg.
Yeah.
They genuinely thought that if you just applied enough systematic inquiry to a problem, whether it was a disease or a social issue, even a war, you could solve it.
It was a world of absolute certainty.
And we are here today to talk about how that certainty got completely and utterly obliterated.
Obliterated is right. We aren't just talking about a political shift here. We are talking about a complete psychological and philosophical breakdown.
Mhm.
In the span of just about 30 years, we went from a universe that operated like a Swiss watch, predictable, reliable, to a universe that was fragmented, irrational, and frankly, terrifying.
So today's deep dive is all about the shattered certainty of the early 20th century. For this, we're pulling from AP European History Topic 8.0, which focuses on these massive cultural, intellectual, and artistic developments.
It is such a heavy topic, but so crucial.
It really is the origin story of the modern mind. Our mission today is to look at how World War I, quantum physics, and Sigmund Freud all conspired to basically kill the rational man.
And leave us with the kind of modern anxiety we're all still feeling today.
Exactly. It's a perfect storm. You have the physical trauma of the trenches violently colliding with the intellectual trauma coming out of the laboratory.
So we should probably start with the physical trauma.
Right. The Great War. World War I. We all know it was bad. But I think, looking back, we sometimes lose sight of why it was such a massive shock to the system.
It wasn't just the sheer scale of the death, it was the method.
It was the absolute betrayal of the promise of technology.
Yeah, that's the key right there. Remember, in 1899, technology is the hero of the story. It is the engine driving moral progress.
Right. It's supposed to save us.
Exactly. And then 1914 hits, and suddenly that exact same genius engineering is being used to efficiently liquidate an entire generation.
It's the industrialization of death. I mean, you look at something like the machine gun.
Oh, the machine gun changed everything.
It did. Before this, war had this heavily romanticized narrative. The cavalry charge, the brave individual soldier making a difference.
The glorious battle.
Right. But the machine gun does not care about your bravery. It doesn't care about honor. It is a factory tool designed for pure efficiency, just applied to human bodies.
It stripped the glory right out of the cultural narrative. Suddenly, you're just meat for the grinder. But if you want to talk about the real psychological break, the most terrifying betrayal of science, you have to look at chemistry.
Oh man, the chemistry is dark.
The exact same scientific field that gave us synthetic fertilizers to feed the world gave us chlorine and mustard gas.
That is the ultimate dark twist of this era. Like Fritz Haber. He literally wins a Nobel Prize for synthesizing ammonia, which goes on to feed billions of people.
Right.
But he also personally oversaw the first major poison gas attacks.
It's a terrifying duality. Science could feed you or it could melt your lungs, and it didn't really care which one it did. And poison gas was unique because it was invisible, it was silent.
And it didn't kill you instantly.
No, it drowned you from the inside out over hours or days. It turned the very air you needed to breathe into a weapon against you. That creates a primal panic that getting shot by a bullet just doesn't.
There's another paradox here that the sources point out, and it's honestly one of the darkest ironies I think we've ever covered on a deep dive.
You're talking about the medical advancements.
Yes, medicine. We usually think of medical advances as the one unassailable absolute good of the era.
You would think so. And strictly speaking, the medical advances during the war were incredible. You had huge leaps in sanitation, the invention of modern triage, early plastic surgery.
Vaccines keeping outbreaks down.
Exactly. In previous wars throughout history, disease almost always killed more men than actual combat. But in World War I, Doctors could keep soldiers healthy enough to stay in those horrific trenches for years.
Which just means they were kept healthy enough to be shelled, gassed, and maimed over and over again.
Yeah.
And because the medical tech was so much better, men were surviving catastrophic injuries that would have easily killed them in 1850.
Resulting in what the texts refer to as wrecked states. You had hundreds of thousands of men returning home to places like London and Berlin with missing faces, missing limbs, severe shell shock.
You couldn't hide the cost of the war anymore.
No, it was literally walking down the street in front of you every day.
It profoundly proved that being smart as a species didn't automatically make us moral. Technology does not equal progress. It just equals more efficient ways to do whatever we decide to do.
Including mass slaughter.
So that's the street-level view, right? The average person is looking around and realizing the world is a meat grinder. But at the exact same time, up in the ivory towers, the scientists are having their own complete nervous breakdown.
This is where we get into the physics. And I love this connection because it shows that the instability of the era wasn't just political or social, it was cosmic.
Right, the universe itself was breaking.
To understand the shift, you have to understand the baseline they were working from. For 300 years, Europe ran on Isaac Newton.
The clockwork universe.
Exactly. The universe was a giant, beautiful clock. It was mechanical, it was completely predictable, and it was absolute. The belief was that if you knew the position and momentum of every atom, you could mathematically predict the future.
It was the ultimate comfort of cause and effect. Time was a constant, steady tick-tock. Space was just an empty stage where things happened. It was a very comfortable, stable place to be philosophically.
And then Albert Einstein publishes a theory of relativity and essentially says, the stage is moving.
This is where people usually glaze over with the math, but the philosophical implication here is absolutely wild. Einstein wasn't just doing complicated equations. He was saying that reality itself depends on where you are standing.
He destroyed the God's eye view. Before Einstein, if you left a room, that room existed in a fixed, objective state.
Right.
But Einstein, and later all the quantum physicists, argued that measurements of time and space actually change depending on the observer's speed and position. Time is not a universal constant. It slows down or speeds up.
Which is deeply unsettling if you're a Victorian who is completely obsessed with objective truth. It implies that truth is subjective.
Yes.
But then Werner Heisenberg comes along and just kicks the door entirely off the hinges with the uncertainty principle.
Heisenberg is the final nail in the coffin for that clockwork universe. He's looking at subatomic particles, like electrons, and he realizes that you mathematically cannot know both the position and the speed of a particle at the same time.
And it's not just that our microscopes aren't good enough, right? That's what people always get wrong.
No, that is the crucial part. It is not a measurement error. It is a fundamental property of nature. Nature is inherently fuzzy. At the most basic foundational level, the universe is based on probability, not certainty.
I want you to imagine telling a society that values order and strict rules above literally everything else, that the fundamental building blocks of reality are completely random.
It creates a massive existential crisis.
Right.
If we can't accurately predict the behavior of a single atom, how can we predict anything at all?
You can't.
And to make it even more stressful for them, just the mere act of observing the electron changes its behavior.
The observer is inextricably part of the system. You can't just stand safely outside the glass and watch anymore. You are in the experiment.
And of course, this wasn't just abstract chalkboard theory. By the time we get to Fermi and Bohr, this new physics leads directly to nuclear fission.
The ultimate terrifying proof. The math actually works. And the prize for figuring it out is a weapon that can destroy the entire planet.
It's like the universe said, yes, I am unstable, and here is a literal bomb to prove it.
Wow. So we have a broken political world. We have a broken physical reality. Naturally, we needed someone to come along and tell us that our minds were broken too.
Enter Sigmund Freud.
The third horseman of the apocalypse of certainty. You know, I used to think of Freud as just the guy with the weird theories about dreams and mothers.
Most people do.
But in the context of this specific era, his timing was absolutely impeccable.
He was the direct antidote to the rational man. The whole Enlightenment ideal was that humans are logical creatures who make measured decisions based on reason. We are the nodal captains of our own ships.
And Freud essentially opens the hatch, points down to low, and says, there is a raving lunatic steering the ship, and we are all just helpless passengers.
He called it the id, the unconscious. He argued forcefully that human behavior is actually driven by irrational impulses, repressed desires, and deep aggression that we aren't even consciously aware of.
Right, we just rationalize our actions after the fact to make ourselves feel smart.
Exactly. The real drivers are entirely primal.
And if you're sitting there in 1920 looking around at the smoking ashes of Europe, Freud sounds a whole lot more convincing than the optimistic philosophers of the 19th century.
Oh, without a doubt.
I mean, if we are so incredibly rational, why did we just spend 4 years engaging in horrific trench warfare for essentially zero territorial gain?
The war validated Freud completely. It showed that modern civilization is just a incredibly thin veneer over our savage nature. If you combine Einstein and Freud, you get a world where the universe is relative and the human mind is irrational.
There is literally no solid ground left to stand on.
None. And that profound lack of solid ground gives us the lost generation.
Which is a term coined by Gertrude Stein. And I really love the origin story of this phrase because it wasn't some high-minded academic theory developed in a salon.
No, it was actually quite mundane. Stein was living in Paris, and she took her car to a local mechanic. The young guy working on it wasn't doing a very good job. He's probably suffering from what we would now call PTSD or just a general post-war malaise.
Yeah.
And the older garage owner yelled at the kid, saying, "You are all a generation Purdue." A lost generation.
Stein overheard it and realized it perfectly applied to everyone who came of age during the war. It wasn't just about being lost like, oh, I can't find my way home.
Right.
It was lost as in moral drifting, a profound alienation.
They were adrift because the cultural compass broke. The values their parents had taught them, things like honor, strict patriotism, religious certainty, those exact values had marched them straight into the meat grinder.
So they completely rejected it.
Exactly.
You see this so clearly in the literature of the time. I mean, just compare a standard Victorian novel to something by Ernest Hemingway. In a Victorian novel, there is usually a very clear moral arc. Good people are rewarded, bad people are appropriately punished, or at the very least, there is a clear lesson to be learned.
And then you read Hemingway's A Farewell to Arms.
It is so bleak. I mean, spoiler alert for a 100-year-old book, but the protagonist deserts the army.
Which is supposed to be the ultimate dishonorable act.
Right, but in the book, he's the hero for doing it. He escapes the madness with the woman he loves. You're reading and thinking, okay, here comes the classic romantic happy ending.
And instead, she dies in childbirth. The baby dies. And the book literally ends with him just walking back to the hotel in the rain.
No grand redemption.
No moral lesson, just random indifferent tragedy.
That is the literary equivalent of the uncertainty principle. It's Hemingway saying, the universe does not care about your narrative.
F. Scott Fitzgerald did the exact same thing with The Great Gatsby. It is all glitz and jazz and parties on the surface, but underneath, everyone is completely hollow.
They're just drinking to drown out the silence.
It's a total rejection of 19th century romanticism and Victorian morality. They swapped romance for cynicism simply because cynicism felt much more honest in a broken world.
But, and I think here's where the story gets really nuanced. Not absolutely everything that shattered was a bad thing. Some things desperately needed to break. We have to talk about the changing social order, specifically regarding women.
This is the fascinating paradox of total war. It destroys almost everything, but it also rapidly accelerates social change. In World War I, you had total mobilization.
Which means you can't just send millions of men off to fight and leave the domestic economy running on autopilot.
Correct. With the men leading in the trenches, the domestic economies of Europe would have instantly collapsed. So women stepped right into the vacuum.
And we aren't just talking about nursing, which was an accepted traditional role.
No, we're talking about heavy industry, manufacturing.
The Canary Girls in the UK are the prime example here in the sources. They were working in these massive munitions factories, handling TNT all day, and the toxic chemicals literally turned their skin yellow.
It was incredibly dangerous, toxic work, but it permanently shattered the Victorian myth of the fragile domestic woman. You simply cannot tell a woman she is too delicate to handle the vote when she is literally building the high-explosive bombs that are keeping the country alive.
It gave them liberty outside the home. It turned suffrage from a polite, easily ignored request into an absolute political necessity. It was leverage.
It really was. It made it politically impossible for governments to deny the franchise any longer. In the UK, the Representation of the People Act was passed in 1918 before the war had even officially ended for some troops. Germany and Austria followed suit immediately after the war.
But it wasn't universal, right? History's never quite that clean.
No, definitely not. France is the notable holdout here in the sources.
Hmm.
Despite French women being absolutely crucial to their war effort, they didn't actually get the vote until 1944. But the broader cultural shift happened across the board. The archetype of the flapper in the 1920s, the short hair, the smoking, driving cars, going out unchaperoned, that simply does not exist without the social shattering of World War I.
It's like the war aggressively shook the etch-a-sketch of society. The old picture of men do this, women do, that just got erased, and society was forced to draw something entirely new.
And that is really the grand theme of this entire era. The shattered certainty wasn't just about destruction, it was about moving into complexity.
You traded safety for reality.
That is a phenomenal way to put it. The 19th century felt safe because it was built entirely on illusions. The illusion of the clockwork universe, the illusion of the rational man, the illusion of inevitable progress. The early 20th century violently stripped all those illusions away.
It forced humanity to grow up. We had to accept that the universe is inherently random, that our minds are messy and primal, and that technology is a massive double-edged sword.
And that kind of rapid transition is painful. It causes a deep anxiety. It causes modernism in art, which is all about fragmentation. If you look at a Picasso painting from this specific era, it looks broken and disjointed because the world itself felt broken and disjointed.
So when we look back at this timeline, from New Year's Eve 1899 to the cynical post-war hangover, it really is the birth of the world we live in right now. We are still living in the wreckage of that certainty.
We absolutely are. We're still grappling daily with the ethics of technology. We are still dealing with the intense anxiety of a complex, unpredictable, interconnected world.
We're still questioning the rationality of our leaders.
Always. The 20th century didn't solve these philosophical problems, it just violently exposed them.
It is a lot to process.
Yeah.
But I think it is crucial context for, well, understanding everything that comes next.
It is. You really can't understand the rest of the 20th century, the Cold War, the massive social movements, the rise of existentialism, without truly understanding this initial foundational break.
Before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a thought to mull over. We've spent this whole time talking about how the incredible new technology of the 1900s, the machine guns, the industrial chemistry, completely blindsided everyone with its dark consequences.
Because everyone just assumed newer meant better.
Exactly. So I want you to look at where we are right now. We are currently standing on the edge of the AI revolution, incredible leaps in bioengineering, total digital surveillance. And we seem to have that exact same 1899 optimism.
People saying it's going to solve all our problems.
Right. But are we actively asking the shadow questions? If the 20th century taught us anything, it's that technological progress absolutely does not guarantee moral progress.
And that observing the system inherently changes the system.
Exactly. So are we truly prepared for the shattered certainty of the 21st century? Or are we all just partying like it's 1899 all over again?
That is the ultimate question.
Oh.
And history definitely suggests the hangover is coming.
On that cheery note, thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
Always a pleasure.